The sun beat down on the dusty town of Crestwood as Lila Hayes wiped her grease-stained hands on a rag, her apron marked with the day's labor. The little garage she inherited from her father was struggling, but it was her pride and her livelihood. She had learned early on that life didn't hand out second chances. If you wanted something, you had to fix it yourself, just like engines. That morning, a sleek black sports car roared into the garage, startling the few customers waiting. The car was impossible to miss, gleaming, expensive, and utterly out of place in Lila's small-town shop. A tall, handsome man stepped out, impeccably dressed despite the dust and oil around him. His name was Ethan Crane. There was something magnetic about him, something that drew Lila's eyes despite her initial irritation. "I need a tune-up," he said smoothly, his accent hinting at sophistication, a stark contrast to the rough, rusty smell of the garage. Lila raised an eyebrow, suspicious. "You know this is a small shop. I don't usually work on luxury cars," she said, her tone polite but firm. Ethan smiled, charming but mysterious. "I'm not looking for luxury. I'm looking for someone who knows what they're doing." There was a spark, an unspoken challenge. Lila was used to men who underestimated her because of her gender and small-town charm, but Ethan's eyes, they held respect, curiosity, and something else she couldn't place. As she knelt to inspect the car, Ethan watched quietly, leaning casually against the wall. He didn't touch the tools, didn't interfere. He simply observed, as if fascinated by Lila's focus, her determination, the way her hands moved over the engine with care and expertise. "Wow, you really know your stuff," he admitted quietly, almost shyly. Lila glanced up, flustered but proud. "I've been doing this all my life. My dad taught me everything I know." For a moment, silence fell, broken only by the distant hum of cars outside and the occasional squeak of tools. Ethan's gaze softened, and for the first time, Lila felt a strange warmth that wasn't just about attraction. It was respect, curiosity, and a hint of something she couldn't yet name. But Lila didn't know his secret. Behind the calm, polished exterior was a billionaire hiding from the world, seeking something genuine, something real, and for reasons he couldn't yet explain, he had chosen her garage. As the sun dipped behind the trees, painting golden streaks across the garage, Lila wiped her hands on the rag again, unaware that this encounter would change her life forever. Unspoken promise hung in the air, a mechanic who knew her craft, and a man who hid a fortune. And soon, their worlds would collide in ways neither expected. The morning after their first encounter, Lila's garage buzzed with the familiar sounds of engines and tools. Sunlight streamed through the dusty windows, casting golden shafts across the floor where oil stains told stories of hard work and persistence. Lila was elbow-deep in a stubborn engine when she heard the familiar roar of a luxury car approaching. She looked up, squinting against the sunlight, and saw Ethan Crane pull into the lot again, the same black sports car gleaming like it had just been polished at a private showroom. Her heart skipped, a mix of irritation and curiosity. "You're back," she said, wiping her hands on a rag, a hint of teasing in her voice. "Didn't you say you only needed a tune-up yesterday?" Ethan smiled, leaning casually against the hood of his car. "I thought maybe I could learn a little more from the best mechanic in Crestwood." Lila rolled her eyes, but there was a twitch of amusement at the corner of her lips. "Flattery won't fix your car." He laughed softly, a sound that seemed unusually warm and genuine for someone so polished. "I don't need flattery. I need honesty and skill. That's why I came back." As Lila knelt to check under the hood, Ethan watched quietly again, but this time his gaze lingered longer. There was an intensity there, a subtle curiosity, almost like he was trying to read more than just the car, maybe the woman who had built this small empire from grease, sweat, and stubborn determination. Hours passed with them working side by side. Lila explained every detail of the engine repairs, her voice steady but animated when she got passionate. Ethan listened intently, asking intelligent questions, not feigning knowledge. His interest was genuine, his demeanor respectful. It was intoxicating. At one point, he reached over to point out a worn-out spark plug and their hands brushed. Lila froze, a rush of electricity sparking through her. She glanced up and their eyes met. Ethan's lips quirked into a subtle, knowing smile, but he said nothing, just returned to observing. I have to ask, she said, finally breaking the silence. You're not really from around here, are you? Ethan's expression tightened slightly, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. You could say that. I've traveled a lot for work, different places, different lives. Lila sensed there was more behind the vague answer, but she didn't press. Somehow, she felt she could trust him, or at least she wanted to. Trust was rare in her world. People with polished shoes and perfect smiles rarely had honest hands like hers. The day waned and the sky turned a fiery orange. Ethan helped her clean up, his hands surprisingly gentle, his presence calm yet magnetic. When he finally handed her a check, Lila raised an eyebrow. That's more than we agreed. It's fair pay for talent and maybe a little extra for company, he said, smiling. There was a flicker of mischief in his eyes, but something else too, an unspoken longing, a carefully hidden vulnerability. Lila's heart raced. She wasn't sure what it was about him. The kindness, the intensity, the mystery, but she felt drawn to him in a way she hadn't felt in years. Before leaving, Ethan paused by the door. I'll be back, he said simply. There's more I want to learn. Lila smirked, a mix of exasperation and anticipation. You better. The engines don't wait for anyone. As the sleek black car disappeared down the street, Lila leaned against the garage door, trying to process the unusual warmth in her chest. She couldn't shake the feeling that this man, this mysterious stranger, was going to turn her life upside down, whether she was ready or not. Unseen by Lila, Ethan drove away, a hint of a conflicted smile on his face. Behind his carefully constructed billionaire facade, he was beginning to feel something he hadn't felt in years. Real connection, genuine admiration, and an undeniable pull toward the woman who didn't care about his wealth, only his presence. The quiet of the small town evening settled in, but sparks had been ignited, sparks that neither of them could ignore, and secrets that would soon make their bond as complicated as it was magnetic. The following morning, the garage was alive with the rhythmic clang of wrenches, the hiss of air tools, and the earthy smell of motor oil. Lila wiped her hands on a rag, glancing at the calendar on the wall. Another day, another set of repairs, and yet her mind kept drifting back to Ethan. Just as she bent over a stubborn carburetor, the door swung open. A tall, broad-shouldered man in a crisp white shirt stepped inside, exuding confidence, his eyes flicking over Lila with thinly veiled curiosity. Hey, he said smoothly, flashing a practiced smile. I'm Ryan. Heard you're the best mechanic in Crestwood. Thought I'd see for myself. Lila straightened, a flicker of irritation crossing her face. And you are? Just someone looking for a quick fix, Ryan said casually, though the sharp glint in his eyes suggested otherwise. He glanced at the car Lila was working on. Seems she knows her craft. You're lucky. Lucky? Lila bristled at the comment, defensive and protective of her space. I work hard. That's what counts, she said firmly, returning to the engine. From the corner, Ethan appeared, stepping quietly into the garage. His gaze sharpened as he watched Ryan. There was an unspoken tension, a subtle shift in the air. Lila noticed it too, the protective tilt in Ethan's posture, the slight hardening around his jaw. Ethan, Ryan said, smirking faintly. Didn't expect to see you here. Ryan, Ethan replied evenly, calm but commanding. I'm here for a reason. You're not. His words carried weight, an understated authority that made Ryan pause. Lila felt a surge of curiosity and something else, a strange reassurance. Ethan didn't have to raise his voice. His presence alone was enough. As the morning wore on, Ryan lingered under the guise of watching Lila work, but his comments were thinly veiled attempts to impress or unsettle her. Every time his hand brushed against a tool or his gaze lingered too long, Lila's skin prickled. She hated feeling like a pawn in someone else's game. Ethan, however, was patient. He offered her gentle encouragement, his compliments specific and sincere. Your technique on this engine precise. You've got a real talent, he said quietly, and Lila felt herself relax despite Ryan's presence. By noon, the tension had reached a subtle crescendo. Ryan leaned against a workbench, watching Lila tighten bolts, his smirk replaced with a calculating expression. I guess I underestimated her, he muttered, loud enough for Ethan to hear. Ethan's response was measured, a flicker of steel in his eyes. You should never underestimate someone who's built her life from nothing, especially not someone like Lila." The words carried an unspoken message, and Ryan's smirk faltered. He straightened, muttered something under his breath and left, slamming the garage door behind him. Lila exhaled, a mix of relief and adrenaline coursing through her. "Thanks," she said softly to Ethan, brushing hair from her face. He stepped closer, gaze softening. "You didn't need me," he said quietly. "You handled that perfectly." Her heart fluttered, but curiosity got the better of her. "Then, why did you stay?" Ethan hesitated just a fraction before replying. "Because I wanted to see how you handle everything, and I wanted to make sure you knew you're not alone." Lila felt a warmth she hadn't expected, the tiniest crack in her guarded heart forming. She wanted to ask more, to delve into the man behind the charm, but she sensed there were things he wasn't ready to reveal. As the sun dipped low over Crestwood, painting the sky in pinks and oranges, Lila and Ethan cleaned up in companionable silence. The garage smelled of oil, sweat, and late afternoon sun, a strange mixture that somehow felt like home. Ethan glanced at the black sports car gleaming in the parking lot, then back at her. "Tomorrow," he said softly, "I'll be back. There's more I want to learn from you." Lila smirked, a spark of anticipation lighting her eyes. "You better. The engines don't wait for anyone, and neither do I." As Ethan drove away, she leaned against the garage door, feeling the pull of curiosity, attraction, and the first stirrings of something deeper. She didn't know yet that Ethan Crane's carefully hidden world, the billionaire persona, the corporate empire, the secrets he carried, would soon collide with her life in ways that would test her heart, her courage, and her trust. The sparks had turned into a slow burn, and neither of them could ignore it. The next morning, the garage smelled of hot metal and oil as sunlight spilled through the dusty windows, casting long, golden streaks across the concrete floor. Lila was under the hood of a vintage Mustang, cursing softly as the stubborn engine refused to cooperate. This repair was tougher than usual, a challenge that made her grit her teeth and double down on her focus. She wiped sweat from her brow when the familiar roar of a sleek engine broke the quiet. Ethan Crane had arrived, stepping out of his black sports car with a casual grace that belied the storm of thoughts running behind his eyes. He carried a small duffel bag that looked oddly out of place in the rustic garage. "Back so soon?" Lila asked, straightening and brushing grease from her hands. There was a teasing edge to her voice, but underneath it, a hint of curiosity. Ethan smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "I thought maybe I could help today, or at least keep you company while you wrestle this beast." Lila arched an eyebrow, skeptical. "Company? What, you plan to roll up your sleeves and get greasy too?" He hesitated, then chuckled softly. "Not exactly, but I thought I could learn a little more about you if that's all right." She frowned slightly, sensing an unusual tension in his voice, a vulnerability she hadn't seen before. Ethan wasn't used to admitting he needed anything, or letting someone see the cracks in his carefully constructed exterior. As they worked side by side, Lila noticed how Ethan's eyes occasionally flicked to the old photo taped inside the Mustang's hood, a faded picture of a man in a suit and a little boy holding toy cars. She didn't ask, but the sight stirred something in her, a silent question. Breaking the silence, Lila said, "You've got a lot more going on than just wanting a tune-up, don't you?" Ethan froze for a fraction of a second, the casual mask faltering. "Maybe," he admitted, voice quieter than usual. "Let's just say this isn't my usual life, but I wanted to see something real, something that isn't calculated, polished, or expected." The words hit Lila unexpectedly. He wasn't just charming, he was carrying a world she couldn't yet see. And yet, he was here, standing in her garage, allowing himself to be real in front of her. Before she could respond, the Mustang roared angrily, refusing to start. Lila groaned. "You're lucky you're cute, otherwise this would be a disaster." Ethan stepped closer, offering a hand to steady her as she knelt. Their fingers brushed, sending an involuntary shiver through both of them. Lila's pulse quickened, not from the engine's resistance, but from the intensity of his gaze, which now held a mix of admiration and something deeper, unspoken. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from the back of the garage. Lila jumped, and Ethan instinctively shielded her with a quick step forward. It was only a falling toolbox, but the protective gesture lingered in her mind. "You're careful," she said, her voice catching slightly. "Not just with the cars." Ethan's jaw tightened, his usual composed smile replaced with a rare, raw honesty. "I have to be. Some things, some people matter more than appearances, more than anything else." Lila's heart thudded, the tension between them thickening like oil in the engine. She realized there was more to Ethan than the polished billionaire she suspected. He was layered, vulnerable, and capable of feelings he rarely let anyone see. As they worked together into the afternoon, the Mustang finally growled to life, its engine purring smoothly. Ethan exhaled, a relieved smile breaking through the tension. "You did it," he said softly, almost in awe. "You did most of it," Lila replied, smirking, though her chest still felt tight with the unspoken truths lingering between them. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky in fiery oranges and purples, Ethan handed her the keys. "I'll be back tomorrow," he said, voice low and hesitant. "There's more I need to learn, about cars and about you." Lila smirked, heart racing. "Better brush up then. I don't go easy on anyone." As he drove off, she leaned against the garage door, hands on her hips, feeling the strange pull of attraction, curiosity, and something unexplainably tender. She didn't know yet that Ethan's carefully hidden world, the billionaire, the empire, the life he shielded, was slowly entwining with hers. And once it collided, there would be no turning back. The sparks weren't just burning anymore. They were igniting a wildfire neither of them could ignore. Next morning, the garage hummed with the familiar symphony of clanking metal and running engines. Lila was already at work, her hands deep in the engine of a rusted old pickup that had seen better days. Sweat gleamed on her brow as she muttered to herself, trying to coax life back into the stubborn motor. Every bolt, every spark plug felt like a battle she had to win, not just against the vehicle, but against the creeping fear of failure that sometimes haunted her. The sound of a luxury car pulling into the lot cut through the morning calm. Lila glanced up, half expecting Ethan, but instead it was a delivery truck with a stack of invoices and parts she'd been waiting on. Frustration bubbled up. Timing was everything, and this interruption was going to slow her down. Moments later, a familiar shadow fell across the hood. Ethan stood there, hands in his pockets, leaning casually against the sleek black sports car. But there was something different today. His usual confidence seemed edged with tension, a weight she hadn't noticed before. "You're early," Lila said, raising an eyebrow. "I couldn't wait," Ethan replied, though his voice lacked its usual ease. "There's something I want to show you." Lila frowned, curious but wary. "Show me. About cars or about you?" Ethan hesitated, then offered a small, unguarded smile. "Both maybe, but first, I need your help with something." Before she could protest, he handed her a set of high-end car parts that weren't for any vehicle in her garage. "These need to be installed," he said quietly. "I trust only you." Lila blinked. "These aren't for any local car, and they're expensive. Why me?" "Because," he said, his eyes locking onto hers, "you see things others don't. You notice details, and I trust you. Not just with engines, but with truth." The words made her pause. Something in his tone was raw, vulnerable, a side of Ethan he rarely let anyone see. She felt a flutter in her chest, a mixture of admiration, curiosity, and a deepening connection she couldn't ignore. As she worked, installing the parts with meticulous care, Ethan hovered nearby, asking questions. Not the casual, charming ones from before, but specific, technical inquiries that revealed he knew more than he let on. He was smart, precise, and for brief flashes, he dropped the billionaire facade, letting his genuine self peek through. But the calm of the morning shattered when Lila heard the distant sound of a screeching car. A red pickup barreled into the lot, tires skidding over gravel. The driver jumped out, a local troublemaker who had been harassing Lila for weeks, trying to intimidate her into lowering prices. "Thought you could ignore me, huh?" he snarled, stepping toward her. Lila's heart raced, adrenaline surging. Before she could react, Ethan stepped in front of her, a subtle authority in his stance that made the troublemaker pause. "She's not the one you want to pick a fight with," Ethan said evenly, his calm masking the tension coiling beneath the surface. Lila stared at him, astonished, not at the bravery but at the protective instinct, the quiet strength that made her feel both safe and intrigued. "Thanks," she whispered, her voice catching. The troublemaker backed off, muttering threats as he left, leaving an echo of tension in his wake. Lila exhaled, glancing at Ethan, whose eyes softened with a rare, unguarded warmth. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low, concerned. "Yeah," she said, though her hand still trembled slightly. "Thanks to you." For a moment, silence wrapped around them, thick with unspoken words. Lila realized that this man, so polished, so mysterious, was slowly becoming essential in her life, not just for his wealth or charm, but for the honesty and strength he revealed when the world pressed too hard. As the day waned, Ethan glanced at his watch, a flicker of regret in his eyes. "I have to leave soon, business obligations, but I'll be back. There's more I want to share, more I want to learn from you from here." Lila smirked, feeling the magnetic pull between them tighten. "Better not be late. These engines, and I don't wait for anyone." As Ethan drove off, leaving the sun to dip below the horizon in a blaze of orange and violet, Lila leaned against the garage door. Her heart pounded, not from fear, but from the thrill of connection, mystery, and the undeniable spark between her and the man who was more than he seemed. Unseen by Lila, Ethan's car merged into the quiet streets, his mind torn between duty, secrecy, and the growing realization that he couldn't stay away from her, or the life she represented, a life real, untamed, and full of heart. The fire between them wasn't just flickering anymore. It was burning brighter, threatening to consume carefully built walls and hidden truths alike. The morning light spilled through the garage windows in warm streaks, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air. Lila was hunched over the frame of a vintage Corvette, her fingers deftly tightening bolts and adjusting wires. Sweat dripped down her temple, mixing with the grease that had become a second skin. This car was more than a project. It was her chance to secure a contract with a local collector who could save her struggling garage. A familiar engine roar made her glance up. Ethan's sleek black sports car rolled in, his entrance almost cinematic against the sunlit backdrop. But today, there was a new tension in his posture, a quiet urgency that made Lila pause mid-wrench. "You're early again," she said, brushing her hands off. "I didn't want to miss this," Ethan replied, voice low and measured. He stepped out, his polished exterior contrasting with the gritty environment. "And I wanted to show you something." He led her to the passenger side, opening a sleek leather-bound folder. Inside were sketches, blueprints, and photographs of high-end cars, classic and modern, paired with investment plans and technical annotations. Lila's eyes widened as she flipped through the pages. This isn't local. These are designs, prototypes, and projects I manage," Ethan said softly, almost sheepishly. "I don't usually show this to anyone, but I wanted you to see what I do when I'm not here." Lila felt a mix of awe and surprise. The polished, confident man she'd seen every day was part of a world she'd only glimpsed in magazines or seen on the news. A billionaire with resources, influence, and pressures she couldn't imagine. And yet, he had chosen to trust her with a part of it. I don't know what to say," Lila admitted, heart pounding. "Why me?" "Because you see people, not just projects. You understand dedication, skill, and heart. I trust you," he said, his gaze softening. "And I wanted you to know there's more to me than you see." Before Lila could respond, the garage phone rang, her manager at the auto parts supplier. A sudden complication had arisen. The Corvette parts she needed had been delayed indefinitely. Without them, her deal with the collector could fall apart, possibly ending her garage's chance at revival. Panic flickered across her chest. Lila had fought hard for everything, every job, every client. But this was bigger than a stubborn engine. This was her future. Ethan noticed immediately, stepping close. "Lila, hey, breathe. We'll figure this out." His hand brushed hers, a subtle gesture that sent warmth through her entire body. She exhaled sharply, trying to steady herself. It's a disaster. If I can't get those parts." Her voice trailed, fear creeping in. Ethan's expression softened, revealing the rare vulnerability she had glimpsed before. "Then we adapt. You're resourceful, let me help. We'll make this work together." Together, they brainstormed alternatives. Ethan pulling from contacts she hadn't imagined existed, calling private suppliers, even suggesting temporary upgrades that could keep the collector satisfied while the original parts arrived. Lila was impressed, not just with his resources, but with his patience and genuine desire to support her, to meet her in her world instead of imposing his own. Hours passed in a flurry of planning and hands-on work. Lila found herself laughing despite the stress, drawn to the quiet intensity Ethan exuded. He wasn't just a polished billionaire. He was attentive, patient, and unexpectedly grounded, willing to get his hands metaphorically dirty in her life. As evening fell, the Corvette sat on the lift, temporarily modified but running beautifully. Lila stepped back, wiping her hands on a rag, a sense of triumph mixed with exhaustion washing over her. Ethan's gaze lingered on her, admiration and something deeper, affection, longing, vulnerability shining through. "You did it," he said quietly. "You always find a way." Lila met his eyes, a fluttering warmth in her chest. "We did it," she corrected softly, the connection undeniable. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the garage in shades of orange and purple. Ethan's hand lingered near hers for a heartbeat longer than necessary, the unspoken promise hanging in the air. "You'll come back tomorrow?" she asked, half joking, half hopeful. "I'll be here," he said, voice low, sincere. "And I'll tell you more about me, about this world, but only if you want to know." As he drove off, Lila leaned against the garage door, heart racing, not from fear, but from exhilaration, attraction, and the intoxicating realization that her life and heart were becoming intertwined with a man whose secrets could change everything. The spark between them had turned into a slow-burning flame, and neither of them could ignore it, especially now that the stakes, both personal and professional, were higher than ever. The garage smelled of motor oil and late afternoon sun, a comforting blend that reminded Lila of home. She was busy adjusting the carburetor on a classic Mustang when the roar of a sleek black sports car cut through the quiet. Her heart leapt. Ethan was early again. But today, something was different. He wasn't alone. A tall, impeccably dressed woman stepped out beside him, her sharp features and expensive taste radiating confidence. Her eyes scanned the garage with an air of ownership, stopping on Lila with a subtle smirk. "Ethan," the woman said smoothly, voice polished, controlled. "You really shouldn't be spending your afternoons here." Ethan stiffened for a brief second before replying evenly. "I like learning from someone who's real, someone who doesn't care about appearances." The woman's lips curved into a knowing smile. "Lila Hayes, I presume, Ethan's mechanic." Lila straightened, wiping grease from her hands, trying to mask the sudden irritation prickling in her chest. "That's me. And who are you?" "Vivienne Crane," the woman said, a hint of challenge in her tone. "Ethan's business partner and cousin." Ethan's jaw tightened slightly, his usual calm faltering under Vivienne's controlled intensity. Lila noticed a flicker of hesitation, something he rarely showed. Vivienne's gaze swept the garage, eyes lingering on the Corvette on the lift. "You're talented," she admitted, turning her gaze to Ethan. "I can see why he's drawn here. But be careful, Ethan, people in small towns aren't always what they seem." The tension between the three was palpable. Lila's instinct bristled. Vivienne wasn't just a visitor. She was a rival, someone who had clearly held a place in Ethan's world that she had no access to. Ethan stepped closer to Lila, protective without touching her. "Vivienne, this isn't the place to judge someone," he said evenly, his eyes briefly locking on hers with silent reassurance. Vivienne smiled faintly, unfazed. "I just want to make sure he knows what he's dealing with. Some things, some people, come with complications." Lila felt a surge of mixed emotions: curiosity, jealousy, and the undeniable pull toward Ethan. She realized that she wasn't just competing with a businesswoman. She was competing with the weight of Ethan's carefully guarded past, a past she was only beginning to glimpse. After what felt like an eternity, Vivienne finally stepped back. "I'll leave you two to it for now. But remember, Ethan has a life beyond this garage. Don't get lost in it." Once the woman was gone, the garage felt heavier. Lila exhaled slowly, trying to steady her racing heart. Ethan's gaze softened, filled with apology and something more tender. "I didn't tell you about her," he admitted quietly, running a hand through his hair. "Vivienne, she's family, and she can be protective, controlling sometimes. I should have warned you." Lila shook her head, a small smile forming despite the tension. "I can handle a little challenge," she said, her voice light but firm. "But you didn't have to put me through that." Ethan's eyes softened, the vulnerability he rarely showed breaking through. "I wanted you to see part of the life I've hidden. I didn't want secrets between us, but some truths, they're complicated. The Corvette purred beneath their hands, the metallic scent mingling with the charged air between them. Lila felt a new layer of their connection deepen, the thrill of mystery, the tug of attraction, and the looming presence of a life that threatened to pull Ethan away from her. As the sun dipped low, casting golden shadows across the garage, Ethan reached out, brushing grease from Lila's cheek with gentle fingers. "I don't want to lose what's starting here with you," he whispered. Lila's breath caught, heart pounding. "Then don't," she said softly, her voice trembling with emotion, desire, and unspoken trust. For the first time, they both realized that love, secrets, and rivalry were intertwined, and that choosing each other would come with risks neither had anticipated. The evening air settled outside, carrying the hum of engines and the quiet promise of something neither of them could ignore. A love tested by shadows, secrets, and the pull of two very different worlds colliding. The morning sun poured into the garage, painting streaks of gold across worn tools and oil-stained floors. Lila was already hard at work on a classic Camaro, her hands moving with precision, sweat mixing with grease. She was focused, determined, but the memory of Vivienne's visit lingered, a subtle edge of tension gnawing at her chest. A familiar engine growl broke the rhythm of the morning. Lila glanced up, expecting Ethan, and sure enough, he was there. But something in the set of his shoulders, the tightness around his jaw, immediately put her on alert. "I brought something," he said, setting down a sleek leather case on the workbench. Inside were blueprints, contracts, and glossy photos, an intimate glimpse into his life she hadn't yet fully seen. High-stakes car auctions, private collections, and a sprawling estate in the city. "These are your world," Lila breathed, running her fingers over the documents, awe and apprehension mingling in her chest. Ethan nodded, voice low, almost hesitant. "I wanted you to see it. I trust you more than I usually trust anyone, but seeing it, it's a lot. It's not just about money, it's obligations, pressure, expectations. And I wanted you to understand me." Before she could respond, her phone rang, jarring her. It was a local client, voice tense and urgent. The Camaro parts she needed for a critical restoration had been stolen, taken right from her garage overnight. Panic clawed at her chest. Without them, she'd lose the collector's contract, potentially ending her struggling business. Lila's hands shook slightly as she explained, frustration and fear bleeding into her voice. Ethan immediately stepped closer, placing a steadying hand over hers. "Breathe," he said softly, grounding her. "We'll fix this together." Together, they devised a plan. Ethan used his contacts, pulling in favors from private security networks, logistics experts, and car enthusiasts. Lila directed local resources, calling friends, suppliers, and even tracking down clues about the theft. Hours passed, tension mounting, until finally they located the missing parts at a shady warehouse on the outskirts of town. It was risky, but Lila refused to back down. Ethan stayed by her side, protective yet supportive, allowing her to take the lead. And when she successfully recovered the parts, a surge of triumph lit up her exhausted face. "You did it," Ethan said softly, admiration in every word. "You never give up, even when the odds are against you." Lila smiled, heart pounding, not from the physical exertion but from the intimacy of shared struggle. "We did it," she corrected, her eyes locking with his. As the day faded into twilight, they stood side by side in the garage, hands brushing occasionally, each touch sending shivers down her spine. Ethan's gaze softened, a rare vulnerability showing. "I wanted you to see this side of me," he whispered. "Not the billionaire, not the obligations, not the expectations, just me. And I hope you can trust me." Lila's chest tightened, emotions colliding, admiration, attraction, fear, and hope. "I do," she said quietly, meaning every word. "Because I see you not what you have, but who you are." For a moment, the noise of the outside world faded, the hum of engines, the scent of oil, and the fatting sun creating a cocoon around them. Two hearts, tested by secrets, rivalry, and danger, now stood unguarded, yet fiercely intertwined. The spark that started as curiosity had grown into a blaze of trust, respect, and undeniable attraction. And as the night descended, both knew that the trials of the coming days would either cement their bond or test it in ways neither could predict. The fire between them was no longer a flicker. It was a roaring flame, and neither could step back now without losing something essential. The night had fallen over Crestwood, painting the streets in a soft, silvery glow. The garage was quiet, the only sound the faint hum of a heater and the occasional drip from the roof. Lila was meticulously checking the Corvette's final modifications, hands steady despite the exhaustion that weighed on her muscles. A sudden knock at the garage door made her jump. She glanced up. Ethan stood outside, the shadows of the night sharpening his silhouette. His expression was unreadable, a tension in his posture that immediately set her nerves on edge. "I didn't expect you this late," she said, wiping grease from her hands, trying to sound casual. "I needed to see you," he said, voice low, urgent. "And there's something I have to tell you." Lila's heart skipped, a mixture of anticipation and apprehension tightening her chest. "What is it?" Ethan stepped closer, his eyes intense, conflicted. "I haven't been fully honest with you about who I am, about what my life really is." Her breath caught. She had sensed layers of secrecy before, but this felt different, more serious, more dangerous. I'm not just someone who loves cars," he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm the heir to a major automotive empire. I have responsibilities, business dealings, even enemies you can't imagine. Vivienne, she's not just family. She's my corporate partner, my protector, and sometimes my adversary." Lila stepped back slightly, shock flashing across her face. "You're a billionaire?" she asked, the words tasting surreal. "Yes," he admitted, tension easing slightly as he let the truth out. "And I wanted you to know because I care about you, and I don't want my world to put you in danger." Before she could process the revelation, the faint sound of tires screeching reached the garage. Lila's heart lurched. Through the shadows, a black SUV pulled up abruptly, lights cutting across the garage door. Ethan's expression hardened instantly. "Stay inside," he ordered, moving to shield her. Two masked figures jumped out, racing toward the garage. Lila froze, fear rooting her in place, until Ethan grabbed her hand, pulling her behind the Corvette. "Trust me," he said, voice firm but filled with concern. The next few minutes were a blur. Ethan's quick thinking, protective instincts, and decisive action kept them both safe as he managed to stall the intruders until the authorities arrived. Lila's pulse hammered in her chest, adrenaline mixing with fear, and an undeniable rush of closeness to him. Once the danger had passed, she looked up at him, heart racing not from fear, but from the intensity of everything that had just happened. I don't know what to say," she whispered, her voice trembling. Ethan reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face, his touch lingering. "You don't have to say anything. Just know that I won't let anything happen to you. Not because of who I am, but because of who you are." Lila's chest tightened with emotion, the storm of fear, trust, and attraction coalescing into something undeniable. I trust you," she said softly, the words carrying weight. Ethan's gaze softened, a rare vulnerability shining through the polished billionaire facade. He leaned in, close enough for her to feel his warmth, the world outside the garage fading away. "And I trust you to stay by my side, even with all of this," he murmured. The sparks between them ignited fully now, not just curiosity or attraction, but something deeper, something that had been simmering under the surface for weeks. The fire of trust, danger, and vulnerability burned brightly, binding them together in ways neither could ignore. Outside, the night settled over Crestwood, but inside the garage, two hearts stood unguarded, ready to face whatever storms lay ahead together. The first light of dawn filtered through the garage windows, casting long, golden streaks across the oil-stained floors. Lila was already at work on the Corvette, her hands steady, but her mind replayed the events of last night, the danger, Ethan's confession, and the unspoken promise lingering between them. Ethan arrived in his black sports car, but today there was no charm, no teasing smile, only intensity, focus, and the weight of responsibility etched across his face. "Morning," Lila said, trying to keep her tone casual. "Morning," he replied, voice low. "There's no time to waste today. We have to move fast. My company's board just called. There's a critical deal and it's tied to this project." He gestured to the Corvette. Lila understood immediately. The success of her restoration wasn't just personal. It was intertwined with Ethan's high-stakes world now. Together, they worked side by side, each motion precise, each glance electric. Their hands brushed more than once, and every touch sent sparks that neither could ignore. Lila's confidence grew under Ethan's guidance, and Ethan, in turn, revealed glimpses of his corporate genius. The meticulous planning, the split-second decisions, the burden of expectation he carried. Suddenly, the phone rang, a threat from a competitor attempting to sabotage Ethan's business. Lila froze, realizing the danger wasn't over. It had followed them into her garage. Ethan stepped forward, his hand brushing hers, grounding her. "We'll face this together," he said firmly. "You're part of my world now, and I trust you." Adrenaline, trust, and undeniable attraction surged as they executed a daring plan. Lila handled the Corvette, ensuring it ran flawlessly, while Ethan coordinated remotely to defuse the threat. By evening, success was theirs. The deal saved, the project intact, and the bond between them stronger than ever. They stood side by side, hands brushing as the sun set behind them, painting the garage in shades of pink and gold. Ethan's gaze softened, vulnerability and admiration shining through. "You did it," he whispered. "No," Lila corrected, smiling through exhaustion. "We did it together." For a long moment, silence hung, heavy, intimate, and full of unspoken promises. Then Ethan leaned closer, lips just inches from hers. "Whatever comes next, we face it together," he murmured. Lila's heart raced, eyes glistening with emotion. "Together," she agreed, a slow smile spreading across her face. The camera would pull back, the garage bathed in the golden glow of sunset, engines humming softly, and the world outside pausing for just a moment to capture the intensity, trust, and undeniable spark between them. Sparkles, if you love the story, hit like, subscribe for more cinematic tales, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next heart-stopping adventure of Lila and Ethan. Bell. The sparks are just beginning, and the next chapter will take you even deeper.